To the third instalment of the EBME Expo webinar series. I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedule to join us today, and wish you all a Merry Christmas ahead of the festivities over the next couple of weeks. We're very delighted and pleased to have our Vice Chairman of the EBME Expo, Mr. Dave Mulvey, here presenting for us today on the Commercially Astute Clinical Engineer, Optimal Engagement with Suppliers to Maximise Value for Money. Dave is also the Director of the Biomed Training Services. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Dave, just with a couple of ground rules with regards to the question and answer session. We do ask that anybody who does have a question for Dave, they just tap it into the chat box. If you include your name and your organisation, that would be wonderful, and we will then do the question and answer session at the end once Dave concludes his presentation. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Well, welcome everybody on such a cold and wet and miserable day here in the north anyway. I hope you're all well, and hope you're not too busy. Today's presentation about working with companies, to my mind, is rather apt at this present moment, because as we all know, we're being somewhat challenged with COVID, and the amount of equipment and the challenges for the biomed engineering community in the NHS. I don't think it's ever been busier. In fact, I know it hasn't. So working together, companies and the NHS, we've got a challenge, particularly as we know we're in the middle of the second phase of this virus, and one can only imagine if things continue at this rate, we're going to end up back as we were in March and April, absolutely pulled out completely. Quick little bit about myself. I retired just less than 18 months ago. My career was 40 years in medical engineering, 30 years of which were spent on the commercial side, working in large companies such as Vickers Medical. I also owned a business with two other guys called Artemis Medical, a small distributor. 30 years on that side of the business. Then I spent my last 10 years, and I returned to working within the EBME department at one of the local hospitals here in the north, in Manchester, where I came back to working on the tools and thoroughly enjoyed it. And in a sense, you might think of me as poacher cum gamekeeper. I've seen both sides. So what I've always felt passionate about is that everybody should think of this when we're talking about engineering as one continuous service, not a them and us. Is that okay? Right, I'd like to move on. Now, the first slide I'm going to put up is one that some people who've spent the majority of their careers in the NHS might find a little challenging. There are a few statements on this that in some ways kind of like take a pin to your beliefs, and you might find it, you know, a little controversial. I'm very, if I do how you think, I hope it's in a positive way. I hope you come to see what I'm driving at. So I'll move on now to the first slide. He said, working with companies, win-win. There's nothing more important than anybody, from the patient all the way through the system back to the chairman and the managing director of the supplying company, to be able to feel that they are in a situation where they're not at a loss, that everybody gets something out of the work they put in. And in doing so, I'll let you just read this. I don't want to read every slide. This may be a surprise to many who've worked in the health service, but I can assure you, having come from the commercial world, the money that's involved, the profits that are involved in medical engineering are nowhere near as high as some people would believe. Yeah, the overheads are enormous. The quantities involved are small. And things like the regulations and everything else that are behind all the equipment that we use, you know, from testing and quality and having enough engineers in the field, they really are a very heavy burden on many of the supplying companies. So they're not for profit. Most of the profit that most medical companies make goes back into development. And that development could be in the development of the field, it could be in the development of the equipment and new technologies. A lot of technologies don't come out eventually, that some do fail during development. Just like if you think about the drugs, and when people are talking about the drug companies in pharmacy. Another point, this is something that I know that as you grow older, you begin to see the wisdom of. Ensure that your requests are reasonable. Reasonable means they need to be, you know, practical. The companies do not have warehouses full of spares and equipment and engineers on the shelves they can just wind up and send out. It's not the way that they are organized. It's not possible. So keep the idea of being reasonable. What would you be able to do in their situation? And this is possibly one of the most controversial statements I ever make. If you were thinking, say, about defibrillators, you'd probably be able to name 4, maybe 5 companies who can supply defibrillators to your hospital. Well, turn it around the other way. Each one of those distributors has a choice of 300 hospitals he can choose to work with. That's something maybe some people don't realize. They're not desperate sometimes to sell in every hospital. So I've been in situations where in dealing with a given trust, the amount of difficulty involved in providing equipment, sometimes you actually turn around and say, it's just not worthwhile. It's going to cost us. So it's something you need to keep in mind. It's a contract of evens. It's people are even in this. There is nobody who has, as it were, the whip hand. You might think you do because you're in the market, but in truth, they do too. Wow. I know I'll be a few questions at the end of this on that particular point. Again, this is all about relationships, is it not? Yeah. No matter how annoyed, angry even you may feel, stay on speaking terms. Yes. Nothing was ever achieved by, you know, taking your bat home, in a sense. You're going to have to, if you've got the equipment in the hospital, you're going to have to deal with this organization. Yeah. But, and I will say this, if you know how the organization is set up and run, then you can effectively deal with the problems you have by going a different route with a given problem. So how do companies operate? Well, let's have a look. In general, most of the organizations you're going to be dealing with, it consists of sales, service, and admin support. Yeah, I'm sure you're aware of that as you're dealing with them. Let's have a closer look at just what it means. Sales, the future. It is all about the future in sales. It's all about tomorrow, right? Which trust is in the market next month for new equipment? Where do we need to be with trials when we're going ahead? You know, who's going to be running the trials in the trust? It's all about tomorrow. Yes. Once your order's been landed and the salesman's been patted on the back and remunerated for his hard work, then it's forgotten. He's looking to tomorrow. Keep that in mind when you're working with salespeople, because it's a very useful thing to keep in mind. Now, service, the present and the past, everything that's been sold, right, that you have on site, they're responsible for. They're going to be the people you're working with. And it's usually these people that you have most interaction with? Somebody you may not really have considered is the admin support. Admin support is the glue that holds the company together. There's no question about it. The people you ring up when you're asking for parts, or you're placing a service call, or you're looking for a quotation, it'll be the admin people. And admin people really do, in an organization, I won't say wield power, but I do think they are very powerful. If you can, work well with somebody, get to know them on the phone about looking for parts, and you're in desperate need for one to be delivered tomorrow, it's amazing how you can, I have to say, and I shouldn't say, but you can sweet talk them, even in going off down to the stores, having a words with the stores manager, picking the part that you need, sending it out on a pro forma invoice, and getting it to you for the next day. These people hold the company together. Sales need them, service needs them. Now, owners and directors, they can be anything from GE, multinational, international businesses with directors at all various levels, right the way down to, a small, almost one-man band, half a dozen employees. But there are three qualities that you need in either owners or directors. And this goes in some ways in any management role: leadership, ambition, and vision. These people at the top of the organization, let's take it in reverse order. They need a vision. Where are they going to take their organization in 12 months' time? How should things look? What will sales expectations be? How are they going to start to deliver service? What are the changes? Yeah. Their ambition is taking that vision and every day taking it into work, and with their staff and with their customers, making that vision, right, a reality. Now, I'll tell you this, leadership is something that you see, or you should see, in the directors particularly, and the senior managers who come to see you. A can-do attitude. What you do see, unfortunately, and this is sadly a fact throughout life, is organizations are either going up or they're going down. If they're going down, you very often see it really reflected in the staff. Well, I've always done it this way. Well, we can't do that. Our systems won't let you. Well, I can't get there till Friday. That kind of thing is what you've got to watch for. When you're going about your daily work and you're involved in the procurement of equipment and the spares and everything else, you've really got to be sure that the company that you're dealing with feels as passionate about it as you do. Think about the internal roles in these organizations. I'll give you a very good example. Again, something of a controversial statement. Sales will need service before service needs sales. Well, if we haven't got sales, we don't need either of them. So that's the truth. But on a day-to-day basis, very often service is involved in the support of sales. The local salesman would ask the local service engineer, could he come along and set up, 3 monitors and everything else whilst he's talking with the senior nursing staff. Yeah, they work together, but it's usually that the salespeople are looking for service to support them. And this is something that you should be aware of and can use, because if the service guys are good at what they do in the way that they demonstrate equipment, you can have them work for you doing the same thing to your staff. Another statement. Most organizations are led by ex-sales managers, right? There are a few, usually people engineers who've started their own businesses. But most organizations see the salespeople as being the future leaders of their companies. Now that's, there is exceptions, but that happens because usually there's a lot more positivity, right, about people in sales. Yeah, They're never turning around and saying, well, you know, this equipment I'm trying to sell isn't as good as it could be, or whatever. Everything's got that positive side, and that is what's needed to lead, is it not? Now, there's somebody you may not even be aware of. These are the finance directors in organizations, and even small organizations will have somebody, a director, who's responsible for it. Anything I would say over 20 people tends to have some sort of financial manager or director. He has a huge influence on the company. He who holds the checkbook holds the power. And he can have that influence over everything from the pricing, development, and structure. Does the company need to move premises? Can we afford to take on new field engineers? How much profit are we making per unit? Pricing is one area in an organization that may surprise people who've never worked in the commercial side. And generally, there are two methods adopted. One is to take the cost of sale. You buy the equipment in, you bring it in from your own manufacturer, there's a transfer cost. You add to that the standing costs of the organization, what it costs to keep the building, what it costs to keep the company cars, the salaries and such. And then there's a variable cost. If we go off to sell it in John O'Groats, right, what's it going to cost us in the way of hotels and everything else to get that equipment up there? And then on top of that, once you've established all those figures, you then might say, well, we need to make a margin, not a profit, but a margin on top of that of a given percentage that we can bring that money back into the organization. Now, that's generally the case for what I would call Me Too products. So if you're selling a standard vital signs monitor against, you know, a number of other competitors who have very similar products, that's maybe the way you go about setting your prices. Another way that it's done is that if you have a unique product or service, you may cost it by taking all those initial costs, like I said, the cost of sale, the actual purchase of the equipment, your standard cost, your variable cost, and then you may sit back and think, well, actually, what will the market stand? If we have unique features and benefits, right, what are people willing to pay for it? That goes on, as you're probably aware, in the commercial world, in things like mobile phones. As we all know, they come out with a very high price initially because everybody wants them, there's some great benefits, and then when they become Me Too products, the prices tend to fall. Yeah, that's very much the case in medical. I've seen it a number of times, right? That initial tranche of sales, right, great deal of the money will be plowed back into paying for the development, for the research that brought that product about. Service provides. Now, the service department, somebody you're very obviously engaged with a great deal, provides a very high level of contribution with low cost of sales. Of course, you're not purchasing equipment. Yeah, you may have to have spares. You may, if you've got working with service contracts at different levels, you may include spare parts. So it's a cost of sale in a sense, but it makes a very high level of contribution to the company's overall profit. And many organizations, unfortunately, sometimes when their development has not been as forward thinking as possible, many organizations fall back on service and start to increase prices for servicing. It's something you've got to be aware of, and you need to understand why it may be happening. Working with company engineers. My 10 years working in the NHS, I can say there was never a single day went by when an engineer from a company did not come on site. There are literally hundreds of engineers coming on site every year. What you need to be able to do is work with them, and that involves asking the right questions. Let's go through a few. What area do you cover? The purpose of this question is to ascertain whether they've got one engineer for the whole of the UK or they've got 10. And of course, if they've got 10, their response time should be better than if they've got one for the whole of the UK. It's not to say that guy who's only supporting 2 or 3 pieces of kit across the UK can't respond quickly. But of course, it's travel time and, holidays and all the other things that go on make it more difficult. Whereas if they've got a decent sized service team, right, covering their areas well, then you're going to get a better. How many field engineers does the company have? Yeah. Are they all just field engineers? Do they work internally as well? Very important question, this third one. Why do you need to know it? You need to know it because there's a statement made by many organizations when you get a problem with the device. We've never seen this anywhere else. But if you were to know where those devices were installed, right? We work for one NHS, do we not? What's to stop you picking up the phone and ringing the other hospitals where they are and asking them if they've seen the issue? Yeah. You'll get to know as well what prices they're paying for the service and the spares, and even for the actual purchase of the equipment. Now, I have to say, England and Wales are not very good at this. Scotland, I couldn't sell so much as a nut and bolt in Dumfries without Inverness knowing what they paid for it. I promise you, their communication up in the Scottish hospitals is to really be admired. They work as one NHS. Another good question. Do you have a service procedure? You're paying a great deal of money for engineers to come along. They may well repair it, but do they verify its functionality? Do you need a copy of that procedure? This comes down to one of the things a bone of contention I have over service reports. All too often I've seen service reports that say checked and tested okay. It's virtually meaningless, is it not? What does it tell you they've done? You've no idea. Maybe a list of spare parts as well, but nothing more. In this day and age, with things like litigation, we need to be able to check and show the auditors from ISO and CQC that we really do have control not only of our own internal servicing and what we do, but also on companies' engineers who come along as well. Get a copy of the service procedure, keep it on file for that equipment. Another one that's surprisingly still happens even in this day and age is if they take equipment apart, should they not electrically safety test it? I passionately believe they should. And even in my career 40 years ago, we did it to every single device we worked on. There are still companies though coming out, right, who don't have electrical safety testing protocols and equipment to do it with, testers. It's not on in this day and age, is it? Let's go on a bit more. Ask the right questions. Ask the question before it happens. Do you carry a stock of spares? Why? Because if he hasn't got the part with him, could you reasonably expect a local colleague of his to have it? Can they not go and meet up, bring it back and fix it today? Does it have to be shipped overnight? Same with loan equipment. Do they carry loaners? If not, what kind of turnaround do they expect to be able to get a loaner to you? All too often, I've known services, the impact on equipment not being available for clinicians can be profound. We can start losing, operating lists, outpatients, clinics, no matter, lots of different things can be impacted by the fact that the engineer, and I do believe it's reasonable that engineers carry a reasonable stock of spares. Another good one. Why does he need to be field-based? Because if he is, you can bring him in and speak to him. Dealing with this on the phone is often less effective than dealing with it face-to-face. It's important he comes on site, shows his face, you then develop a relationship with him. Your confidence in that organization goes up. Yeah? Hiding behind, the telephone, sometimes I don't think is the real way to go forward. All right, service reports. Most companies today, in this day and age, do provide them electronically, and I see as in the years have gone by that the systems have been improved. Yeah, they're not perfect. It would be a shame. It would be a great benefit if there was a standard to which they could, you know, keep to, so that we're not just chasing PDFs and God knows what else. We actually have a system where every job is always copied. Always remember, whenever you're dealing with a company, whenever you particularly place a call with a company, there must be a call reference number. Do not put the phone down if you haven't got that number. It's so important because the traceability of your phone call will rely on that number. So if they don't turn up on Wednesday, when you've rung them on Monday, and you ring back on Wednesday and say, "Where are you?" they'll turn around and say, "Well, you didn't ring." But if you've got a reference number, call reference number, you'll be able to say, "No, I did, and this is the number, and this is the time I rang it." Put it on your computer system. Be really pernickety and be very, very thorough about keeping records about your interactions with the companies. This is something that shouldn't go on, but unfortunately does go on. Always ensure medical staff don't sign. Right? The signature of a medic on a service report, to be honest with you, if you think about it, it's worthless. They don't understand what they're signing for. They're not engineers. They can't answer for it. Right? It may get the engineer out of the hospital quicker than he would, as quick as he could possibly be. But you are the only people who can sign off those reports with the authority of knowing what you're signing for. Get to know them. These people, right, if you think about it, have as much impact on the care and well-being of patients as you do, and even as much as the medics do. If they do a good job and the equipment is serviceable and is available, then, one device can be used on many patients in the space of a month. Make them feel part of your team and you part of their team. There needs really to be an idea that they're not from another planet. They really are, in a sense, and I know this is a bit of a stretch, but they are really part of the NHS, are they not? The National Health Service, right? We need them and they need us. If we work together, this kind of thing can happen. Yeah. The amount of times I've been able to resolve a problem on site with a device, with the telephone support of one of the local engineers, I've lost count. And it is a great way of working, right? You can even have them guide you through the final processes of checking and testing the device. And if it means that the guy's not having to race up the M6 and spend 6 hours in the car, right, and delay the process in the pathology department or cardiology department, what a plus. You know, and I know, if you're working in a hospital, don't spend all your days in the workshop. Get out and work with the staff. And if you're working with the staff and we're talking about engineers coming up to do, say, routine servicing or even repairs, always work with the medical staff to ensure the equipment is going to be available. The number of times I've met engineers who've come up to site, gone off to the department, got there and suddenly been told, "Oh, I'm very sorry, but we've decided we're going to put a new list on today," with no notice. You have to double check. You have to make sure it's available. It's in no one's interest, even the staff, to allow those kind of situations to arise. You have to be extremely diplomatic when working with medical staff. We all know they're under a massive amount of pressure, but it is vital that equipment is serviced on time and regularly, and that repairs are done optimally. The worst thing I know of is when you get this situation where they ring up on 4 o'clock in the afternoon and tell you the device is broken, right? The cables, there's sleeving this and there's something wrong with that. And then the engineer turns up and they turn around and say, "Yeah, well, it's not right, but we're using it." It's in no one's interest. It's not safe. It's a complete waste. And the companies have the right, and it is the right to charge you for such a call. Get to know them. Help them with anything, with everything, parking included. In fact, parking is, if you're a field engineer, I can tell you, it's the biggest bugbear of your day, finding somewhere to park. If the Biomed can find an area, usually somewhere close to the workshops, where they can offer a space for visiting field engineers, there are two things that flow from that. One, an engineer who's extremely grateful, and two, the hourly service charge to getting to do the job goes down because the engineer's been more effective on getting in on site quickly. Offer them a bench space to require it, even sundry items. I know this sounds strange, but I have even known field service engineers leave a hospital site to travel halfway around Manchester in order to go and buy something from Radio Spares that was in the stores in the medical engineering department. It's a complete waste of time. Working with them, offering them bench space, you also get to see what they do, which is no mean, something really worth. Ask them to demonstrate and train you in the operation and the frontline issues of the equipment. It's in everybody's benefit. Half an hour spent with a field service engineer on a device that you don't see every day of the week, is really useful because it means that you can handle those frontline problems, help and guide staff, retest equipment properly, sort out minor problems. Do's and don'ts. Never do this. Never fall into this trap. I've seen it done. Why should you not rubbish their competitors? Because the guy will leave and think to himself as he leaves, I won't get through the gate before they're rubbishing me. You never know what gets fed back. You can, in a rather sweet and gentle way, talk about the competitors. Well, we get really good service from firm X. Their engineers are very polite and always turn up on time, and that they don't have a problem sending us spares. What you're actually doing is you're laying the seed of a competition, They'll go away thinking to themselves, well, for us to be considered like that, we need to up our game. Again, I return to this thing. Make sure you know the facts. Make sure your documentation about the problem that you've been having is thorough, timed and dated. If you're working with a database like Equip, make a note of when you rang the company, who you spoke to, what time it was, and what they promised. Now, there's a world of email out there, and email's a wonderful tool, but email is really a better tool for confirming what you've discussed and what you've agreed. A phone call, when you're talking to people over problems, is far more effective than just sending emails. Emails can be ignored. Emails, what you write and what you read are not necessarily the same thing. But a voice conversation that you confirm in an email really does, as it were, confirm the discussion. How many times have you had the engineer back for the 4th time to a device and he doesn't seem to be getting very far, and you're apt to fly and say, well, you should have done this and you couldn't do that, and you really let fly with your frustration? Don't. Hold back. Allow him time to consider his answers. Use silence. When people are, given the opportunity to breathe and actually explain what's going on, you'll get far more out of it. You'll find that they're far more willing to compromise. Well, I'm sorry I didn't make it on Wednesday, but there'd been an accident on the motorway. Instead of flying off the handle, and it may well be that the engineer was not necessarily at fault, Wait and see. Again, I come back to this point, never get angry or emotional. You're going to be working with these guys for years. No matter what either of you think, the hospital has its equipment, it needs a supplier to supply the support. You're going to have to face these people again. It's no use leaving it on such a sour note that you can't speak to one another. Do's and don'ts. Remember that company engineers, I've always found company engineers to be the most honest members of their organizations. And that's not to say that the others are dishonest, but it is to say that they're usually the most open. A very good example, you ring up and you ask for some, you've ordered batteries and you've not had anything for a month from this company. So you ring up and the lady on the desk who answers the phone says, oh yes, they're due in next week. And you think, well, they told me that 2 weeks ago, right? And then they told me that last week. So the service engineer comes in and he say, have you got any of these batteries? Oh no, we won't be getting those for another 2 months. We've changed supplier. The amount of times that's happened, right? I can't count. But it is the sort of thing that a field engineer will say to you, right? He'll be open, he'll be frank. Another point to make, none of these people work for you. They work extensively for the hospital staff and its patients. Make them feel that. Always say that I'm only asking because we've got a clinic on Tuesday and there are 6 patients. Not that I need it doing now, but the hospital needs it doing, the patients need it. If you do that, it's a moral thing, isn't it? It brings about a moral dilemma for them. They know that they need to work harder or sort the problem out more effectively. When they have done a good job, and most of them do, 99%, thank them sincerely. It's amazing. One thanks is worth any bonuses they get from the company, right? They begin to feel as though what they're doing really matters, right? It matters to you, to the staff, and to the patients. It doesn't cost anything to say thank you. Keep in mind the pressures they face as they travel around. Traffic, parking, time. Yes? Sometimes you have to understand their priorities. If it's a major breakdown when they were coming to a service, as long as they tell you and you can put the equipment back into use until they can get to you, right, that's fine. But allow them the opportunity to make those decisions, because at one point it'll be you with the major breakdown that you want them there tomorrow, first thing. This is one point that I know is something that happens all too often. Credit notes. You've ordered some parts or you've ordered a device, and for one reason or another, it's been decided it's not necessary. Once you've got the parts in, your manager or whoever has decided the equipment should be scrapped and that you need to return the parts. It is quite reasonable for the company to charge you a restocking charge, and that sometimes is anywhere between 10 and 20%. Now, a number of companies, right, because they've got your cash, as it were, right, are reluctant to part with it and will offer you a credit note. And I can tell you this by working in the NHS and on the commercial side, never accept credit notes. The reason being, credit notes get forgotten. They actually disappear in the mist. Yeah. 6 months later, when you go to order new parts from the same organization, it'll have been forgotten. You don't have in the NHS a really adequate system of keeping track of credit notes in companies. And it's not to say that companies are doing it deliberately, but it does end up where thousands of pounds sometimes are held by companies and get lost in the mist. When they come to do their annual accounts years on, They have all this on their books. It's called creditors, sorry. This money is creditors, and sometimes it never gets claimed. The other confusing part can be that if you're working for a department, say cardiology, and you've ordered these parts and sent them back, and the cost has been internally charged to the cardiology department, the next time you place an order, it may be for the renal unit. And in that case, one department's basically funding another. It's not a good idea. If a company can accept payment, it can make repayments. And I really do feel you need to take that up with them and keep them to it. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that, Dave. Yeah, as Dave asked there, if anybody does have any questions, please please put them into the chat box so we can address them as quickly as well as possible. Really interesting topic, Dave. I'm expecting lots of happy vendors and exhibitors to be at the EBME Expo in June the 30th and July the 1st now, after having the red carpet rolled out, some like you suggest, from all of the hospitals and the trusts around the country. So yeah, once again, thanks very much for such a fantastic presentation. Any questions, any coming in from anybody at all? John says, thank you, Dave, for the excellent presentation. Just while if anyone might be typing up any questions, just to remind everybody that the EBME Expo will be taking place on June the 30th and July the 1st, 2021 at the MK Arena. You can register on the EBME Expo website, ebme-expo.com, or on the EBME portal, which is ebme.co.uk. Registrations are free for all attendees. Still no questions coming in just yet. Oh, here we go. From John, fantastic. So Andy, ditto, thanks. Angus at Biomed here. Thank you, David, a great presentation. Here's from John, I believe John Sandham. Hi, John. What do you think about long-term service contracts, say 5 years?
Yes, if you can be assured of the company has a history that goes back more than 5 years, then I'd be happy to take on a service contract of 5 years. You should get the very best price, and you should be able to negotiate, you know, really well. It gives benefit to both sides, does it not? It gives an assurance to the hospital that service is available for 5 years, and that includes and must include, right, a guarantee of spares, right, across the whole range. We do not take out service contracts for such longevity on equipment that suddenly can be declared, you know, obsolete. Now, if it is said on those contracts that the equipment is elderly and that the contract will be based on a best effort, in other words, all parts are not readily available, as long as you go into that knowing, then that's fine. But long-term contracts do benefit everybody. Company knows its financial reward for doing it, and it knows its service commitment. The hospital knows what it will be able to use the equipment, you know, in the coming years, and really it benefits everybody.
Thanks, Dave. A couple more things. I think just messages of gratitude from Heidi. Thank you so much for a great webinar. Excellent speaker and so honest. From Ruth Sandham. Thanks, Dave. Very useful ideas to assist in the smooth running of engineering departments. And from Singh P. Great presentation. Many thanks. So unless there's any other questions, we'll wrap that up there. Once again, thanks very much for everybody for taking times out of what I can imagine is a really, really busy schedule with everything that's going on in the moment. I'd like to wish you all a wonderful Christmas and New Year period, and hope that you manage to celebrate as much as possible given, and as safely as possible given the current circumstances. And yeah, once again, Dave, thank you very much indeed for such.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody else. And again, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. We've got some trying times. I'm now back working in the NHS locally due to the COVID crisis. So I'm back at the coalface with many of you. So thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Speak soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.